Hey guys, hope everything is going well. You guys know the drill. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't, and comment down below. Follow me on Instagram at AIH_sports. All right, today I wanted to touch base on a few things. I want to show you this one card first. It's a SGC7 2001 hand cut Roger Federer, and there aren't that many of these out there. They may be in someone's collection that they didn't send off. PSA doesn't grade these, by the way. When I first bought this, I got it for about 300 bucks, I think from a guy in London. And I sent it to PSA. PSA didn't know anything about it. So I sent it to SGC. SGC knew something about it, and then they graded it. I felt that they messed up the back at the top. I don't know if you can see this, but it's like right over here. I didn't even notice this when I first had the card. My wife didn't either. We thought that it must have been messed up by the time or when we sent the card out. And at the time SGC handled it. I have no proof that SGC botched it up, but ultimately we thought it was going to be an 8 or a 9, and it turned out to be a 7. Still, this is the highest grade out there, so, or one of the highest grades. I don't know if anything has been graded in the past few months, but ultimately, in terms of comps, this uncut sheet is about $2,000. A few months before, I believe, it was $3,000, and I bought it for 300 bucks. And previously, before this pandemic, it was about maybe 100 some bucks. So that's quite interesting. Over time, this will be scarce in my opinion, and it doesn't matter how backlogged some of these grading companies are. The population size is low, and Federer is definitely going to be in the top 3 unless you see a new guy come out. But I believe this card is going to be good for quite a bit. And even if the whole house of cards collapses, like I say, it will happen. Now, I wanted to now touch base on this one topic, and it's regarding how history is repeating itself. And I'm really interested about history. This is actually one of my hobbies, just learning, not hobbies, but interests. I like learning all these type of things. There's a few quotes out there. One of them is by Santayana. I think George Santayana. He's, I believe, a Spanish philosopher. But he said this: those who do not understand history are condemned to repeat it. And there's also another quote by Mark Twain. It goes along the lines like, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it rhymes. And just from my own personal interest, I'm just going to get into sports cards and history in a little bit, but I just wanted to share these things. So yeah, I have this huge interest in history. I like learning things about, the same thing happened with the Russians, with Napoleon. Napoleon went into Russia and they starved themselves in the winter. And then Germany and Russia, same thing during World War II. The Germans did the same exact thing. They got screwed over in the winter. And like from my end, just looking at it from a finance perspective, another historical thing, and it ties into my analysis of sports cards, and that is looking at the Great Depression and looking at what happened during the financial crash of 2008. Similar things happened with the Federal Reserve. They kept interest rates too low for too long, and they created an asset bubble, and the whole thing collapsed. And going into sports cards, I noticed like the same thing with monetary policy, and I'll get into it again. But in regards to history, though, in sports cards, many things are similar. So it's more of the lines of Mark Twain's history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it rhymes. And here are a few instances. Okay, you had a huge interest and huge demand for people in their 20s and 30s, a new generation that decided to get into sports cards. They saw an opportunity of making money, flipping cards, making a huge profit, and people thought they were experts and rock stars regards to this. And you have this huge interest. Back then, there was no YouTube. Now you have YouTube, and you could see how many channels have propped up. My channel has propped up too. My channel is there because I want to relieve stress, because our political climate is flat out crazy. But regardless, you could see the demand. You could see a lot of people on YouTube now. Two, you could see that individuals in their 20s and 30s, grown men, used to fight over cards at stores. And I got this information from my buddy Don. He said that, hey, old men are fighting over sports cards back then and today. And today they're fighting over sports cards at Walmart, Target. Guns were allegedly, there was gunfire involved in some of these cases. It's insane. And you could see the mania where people, they just want to flip these boxes that have a lot of supply to begin with, and they're just fighting over it because they think that they can make money by flipping it. It's quite insane, but it happened. And the third thing, which is also my interest, is looking at the monetary policy end. So in the 1980s, the interest rates were about 10%, the short end of the curve. And then Alan Greenspan lowered the interest rates from 1989 to the mid 90s, like 93, 94. It was about 3%. That's a huge decrease. And you had all that money coming in, because when you lower interest rates, you have to buy a bond. So you're increasing liquidity in the system. You're artificially doing that. So it went to the stock market, it went into sports cards, it went into real estate, etc. So what happened here in the US, like 2018, in my opinion, was a good time to buy. So they were lowering interest rates. This time it was from 2%. And then if you look at last year, the increase in liquidity in the system was insane. The rates went to zero at the short end of the curve. And they kept on giving all this stimulus to people. And so you had all of this excess speculation in the market. And now, what's a little different is in the 1990s, mid 1990s, 1994, they just raised interest rates from 2% to about 5% within 1 year. That killed the bond market, that killed the sports card market, killed basically collectibles industry. And this time around, here, where history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it's rhyming, the Federal Reserve is slowly taking the punch bowl away. They're going to taper, meaning, like I've said before, stop buying bonds at a much slower rate each month by month. And eventually, once they're no longer going to buy these securities, the Federal Reserve interest rate, or Fed funds rate, is going to go up 25 basis points. It's not that much, but when you have the whole system, especially the sports card market, which is addicted to all this speculative money, now that punch bowl is going away. The gravy train is slowly ending. And doesn't mean everything's going to crash overnight. It just means that, okay, it's not going to be what it was the last few years. And that's going to start probably sometime mid-summer next year. I mean, unless they reverse course, but it looks like some sort of tightening is going to happen. That doesn't mean the whole economy is going to crash, but just to put that into perspective. The other thing that I noticed, where history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it's rhyming, is there was an MLB lockout that happened in 1994. And what pissed a lot of people off during that time was that, hey, these guys are making a lot of money and now they don't want to play. Like, what's up with that? So there was less demand for these sports cards, and a lot of people collected baseball cards. Now, what happened the other day in baseball? There's another lockout. Now, the jury's out on how long this is going to be. The last lockout was pretty bad. It was what? I think at least 7 months. I think one of the problems here with this divide is going to be, okay, the union may say, hey, you can control these guys for about 6 years, but there's a loophole. If they're in the minor leagues, like Chris Bryant was in the minor leagues for 1 month, that added one more year to the Cubs retaining control of Chris Bryant. So, in my opinion, for an all-star caliber player like Chris Bryant, that's not fair to him. So, like, they're gonna have fights and disputes. Eventually, they're gonna come to an agreement. It's just when. I believe they are gonna play next year, but still. So you have all these things going on, and I believe there could be potential opportunities from a flipping perspective, even though I'm not going to be aggressively looking at flipping, but because of this MLB lockout. But that's just something that I'm looking into. So we have all these things going on here, and you know, you could say this is a bit crazy, but I've been looking at just Googling things about history repeating itself. And one thing I came about in a book, just on Google Books, I looked at it, is it said something about Pluto's cycle. Okay, this sounds crazy and how I'm incorporating this in this video, but just hear me out. So apparently Pluto has its cycle every about 248 years. The last time it cycled was 1776 when the Declaration of Independence was signed. And usually when regarding Pluto's cycle, you tend to have changes in society, major changes in society. So 1776, that definitely changed the rest of society, even up to today, right? America, despite its problems, is still, the lead leaguer. I mean, not lead, it's just the leader in regards to all of the other countries. Now, when is the next time Pluto is going to be cycling? Or when does the next cycle? And that is 2022 to 2023. Could be 2024 too, every 248 years. And the saying is, and based on history, is you tend to see crazy things happen, just transformations in society. You could look at previous things in the Roman era. I'm going to do more research on that, but that's just a little bit of research that I've come about. So I talk about this cycle in the stock market. Everything should collapse by 2024, sometime around there. And we're hitting that Pluto cycle now. So regards to all types of assets. So it could be crypto, it could be real estate, it could be, yes, even sports cards. So, yeah, and I never looked into the cycle of Pluto. I always looked at individuals like Martin Armstrong. He looks at the cycle of pi. There's Avi Gilbert, who uses Elliott wave theory, which is quite interesting in his analysis. He says that America is going to be a little different after this bull market we've been experiencing. So after 2023, he believes there's going to be major problems for at least a decade or two. He calls it a lost decade. We shall see if he's right, but I'm not even looking at Pluto. And if this Pluto cycle thing has any relevance, some people may call it a crackpot type of way of analyzing. I'm just open to reading and listening to people of all different backgrounds and perspectives and see what they have to say. And I'm coming to a conclusion just based on monetary policy, right? I'm looking at Hayek's principle, where he won a Nobel Prize. You keep interest rates too low for too long, bada bing, bada boom, the whole thing collapses. So, yeah, just a lot of things that I'm looking at. History seems to be rhyming, like Mark Twain says. And that's why I'm a bit cautious compared to a lot of these other channels. I'm not taking a swipe at them. Sometimes people have a hard time understanding where I'm coming from. And I'm just basically looking at history. And just on another side note, when I talk to a lot of people, I just bring up all this sort of information that I research and I've documented. And usually they end up getting really mad at me. Especially the past year, a lot of physicians in my family and my wife's family have gotten mad at me because I'm coming up with all sorts of information that contradicts what they're saying. And I basically look at history and it just ticks them off, and a lot of people in general. So it's hard for me to talk to most people because I look extensively at history and what goes on, and I look at it from an unbiased perspective. I have an open mind to listening to all sorts of things. Doesn't mean I necessarily agree with people. That's why I go on YouTube. It's more of me sharing my thoughts. I really don't care if people disagree with me. It's more of, you know, even if you disagree with me, you could tell me why you don't agree with me. And sometimes that leads to a productive discussion or me just doing more research. And this is just my hobby. But, anyways, guys, I am interested to see what you have to say. You think this is just a bunch of crackpot conspiracy theories, or this research is crap? Or is there any credence to it? Or do you agree with other things that I'm saying? Leave your comments down below. Smash the like button and subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye.